I'm going to put this out because it's going to be another one of my true perspectives on things. This is not to put out doom and gloom, but I'm going to give it to you straight up, and it's probably been in the back of people's minds for maybe a long time. The best real signs of an upcoming financial collapse, and not to say I want doom and gloom and scare people and all this garbage, but the best signs that there's a true financial collapse coming up is that we are overburdened with basically bureaucracy, nonsensical office pokes, people doing paper shuffling. I know this type of stuff has always existed since the dawn of time, where you have to have an administrative type thing that runs the government, that runs all these different organizations that are part of the basic society and economy for goods and services that are maybe not the meat and bones of the economy, but are still necessary. But in the United States, that's actually become the major service sector where, and you know what I'm saying, a service sector that's not actually providing anything. It's an entity that basically feeds itself. Like I'm talking about, say, the IRS, the taxation, the laws with health and all the forms that are filled out have to be filled out, the social services, the whole thing. There's actually more bureaucracy being involved than actually getting the job done. Like, just take a simple thing like, like you're going to go clean your house or mow your lawn or something. Let's take a real basic example. It's almost like, say, I got to fill out a form to clean the countertop or vacuum the floor, or I got to fill out a form and have it assigned and approved because I'm going to mow this section of the lawn and I have to check it off. And so, you just do it. You just do it. That's what's actually going on today, where you have so much bureaucracy. The major whole economy is actually overhead that's total nonsense. And actually today, most of the males in the United States, and I'm not talking about the blue-collar worker, which I really have respect for, there's loads of these people that will just not, males and things, that just will not get their hands dirty. They will not slave out in a hot, cold, wet, sunny, or whatever the hell it is, hot, beating sun beating down on them weather. They just won't do it. It's all air-conditioned office and, loads of freaking people sitting around doing nothing. Basically, filling out forms for the bureaucracy to keep everything the way it should be. But actually, are they actually contributing anything? No. If you actually look around in society, like if you look, not just in society, but actually in your real hard physical world, you have, the roadways, you have the energy production, you have the venues of how communication is delivered to people, like with this YouTube, for instance. That's something that's empirical, whatever. Actually exists, that's necessary. You have like food production, you have, lumber, plumbing, electrical, things that people actually use in their day-to-day life. But actually, today, the American economy has become a major focus on bureaucracy, filling out forms for the government, basically one way or the other, or something that's required by some law some way, or required by some, maybe it's a corporation that has to comply with some other thing, some other law. There's loads of these forms being filled out left and right, and actually people are not actually performing something that's useful to somebody else. And actually most people today, there's so many people involved in these type of processes, like the people who work for the government and things like that. They will not ever get their hands dirty or whatever. They will not do anything where maybe they don't know, like in other words, they won't work for themselves for once. That's one. They want something where they got the government check coming to them no matter what. There's loads of people like that, and that's actually a sign of impending doom, because we don't have too many entrepreneurs that much left in America where you say, this person's a person that does roofing, they put roofs on houses, this person does driveways, this person does tree trimming, this person builds furniture, repairs furniture, this one reconditions, I don't know, appliances or something, and makes them better than new or something. You don't have too much of that anymore. All the manufacturing, even the hard manufacturing, most of it's gone to China. That's why I'm going to say that the United States is going to experience financial doom very soon, because the real essential goods are being provided by less and less people for less and less money. And you know, I tell you the truth, there's one channel on this YouTube I watch. Well, there's a few channels actually I watch a lot, but there's one I always watch is SWNRC, Southwest Custom and Rod, and DIY Auto School. Even though I kind of know like what he tells me, I remember it from 40 years ago and stuff. I like watching that because that's a guy that's an entrepreneur, that's in business for himself, that's blue collar, that contributes something to the world and society. But you know what's going on? Those kind of people are more and more rare. You got people that just sit back in the office, collect fees for, you know, transactions on different things. You got government regulations that it must be enforced, so you have to have, there's a job created for a bureaucrat to fill out forms and go on the computer and do this and do that. And actually, all these things never existed 100 years ago, but you know, everything still got done. And actually, they got done even better. You know, with today's technology and methods, we'd actually be exponentially better off without all this bureaucracy. But what I'm saying is, this is a real sign of impending doom. Why? Because most of the efforts of people, and you know, they're nil efforts, because these are people that usually do not want to work out where it's cold, it's wet, it's dirty, it's difficult to do. They don't have their job laid out for them. They don't know how to freaking deal with new problems and stuff like that. It's usually like somebody that's like, you know, fixing the framing on a house or doing a plumbing job. You know, those are the type of people that have to deal with something like that. These people that are bureaucrats in offices, hang it up. Hang it up. They won't do that kind of stuff. They're not contributing anything to society. They actually, most of them have their security is by the government one way or the other. Either it's through enforcement of laws that exist and that are compiled upon itself, either with the tax code, the health care code, or social services that are required, or other things. But that's the main sector now of, if you look at the aggregate employment throughout the United States, most of it's actually people that are in these type of jobs. And a lot of people, even if they're working in a corporation, they have a job created for them, which actually is created because of government regulations. This is really the real sign of impending doom. We got an economy, and you know, they can measure the economy and say the GDP is this much, but when you're looking at that stuff, like say for instance, you say the GDP is so much, and out of that GDP, there's pharmaceutical drugs, for instance. And then there's all the bureaucrats filling out forms for insurance so people can get these pharmaceutical drugs. Well, if the GDP goes way up in that area, people will be saying, "Oh, the economy's recovering." And I say to myself, that doesn't mean the economy's recovering. It means there's more bureaucrats filling out forms so people could take more pharmaceutical drugs, and somebody's getting rich off those pharmaceutical drugs. They're not doing anything constructive. Period. You know, there's an old saying, you know, it may be, and you know, it may be somewhat true, maybe not exactly literally, but the Indians, or the American Indians, you know, maybe, I don't know if that's the proper word anymore, but people know what I'm talking about, the American Indians, right? The ones that are actually in this country before, you know, the Europeans came over. It's like they say that we're going to return to the old ways. It may not be that much, but it's probably going to go back to after this strata of bureaucracy and financial upkeep. You know, in other words, you call it where people are actually complying with all these laws on the government. You know, you got healthcare HIPAA laws, you got forms for insurance, you got forms for taxes, you got forms for SARS, you know, SARS compliance and stuff like that in corporations. You know, once all this garbage goes away, it's going to probably go back to the laissez-faire pure hardcore entrepreneur that actually has to provide a product to somebody at a price they can afford, and it has to be a good product, which is going back to, you know, the skilled tradesman, almost, well, basically the blue collar worker, more or less. I really would call it the skilled tradesman more than anything. You know, it could be auto body work, auto mechanic work, you know, which is some things I know a little bit about, but it could be something like, you know, the plumbing, the electrical, the framing, you know, doing carpet installation or whatever, landscaping, you know, driveways, pool installation, patios, or whatever to have you out there. Or it could even be in textiles and computer repair, or communications, electricity, you know, with the lines and power lines and stuff. It's going to go back to more and more of that, because there's actually less and less people doing that. For every person you actually have doing that, you've got like loads of people in offices, and that's really where a lot of the jobs are being filled by women, because a lot of the, you know, you can say, oh yeah, I'm being insulting about that, but by and large you don't find too many females that are roofers, for instance, that get up there on a hot roof and they don't work for like the government or a big company. They actually work for themselves as a contractor, and they have to bid on, you know, compete with other people's bids for jobs and get business on their own. You don't see too many women doing that, because it's actually in nature that it's that way. But actually a lot of the job security of, you know, what you see going on in throughout the country in social services, for instance, and things like that, it's because the government created it, and you got these people doing what? Pushing paper, pushing forms, you know? And when they get money for something, you know what they do? They want something new, they buy a product made in China or Korea or whatever, you know what I mean? It's not even actually manufactured here. So once that stops, and you know, the dollar will go down because of this reason. Once that stops, that whole bureaucracy is going to be out the door, and it's going to go back to where people actually have to produce something, probably with their hands and their minds, both together. You know, even blue collar workers quite use their minds quite a bit. I realize that, you know, when you're doing auto body work, or you're doing mechanical work or plumbing work or anything, you actually are using your brain a lot. It's probably one of the reasons auto mechanics sometimes are some of the worst ones going, because some of the people that go into that type of work think they're not going to work with their brain, they're going to work with their hands, and they realize, you know, they're actually working on a very complicated piece of machinery, and they have to really use their brain if they're going to be really good at the work. But it's like, it's still, you know, even if somebody's a shortfall in that type of trade, it's still far more productive that it's doing something for somebody than what you see in a bureaucracy. People filling out forms all day for, you know, compliance with federal regulations on state laws, federal laws, social services, you know, you name it. That's most of the economy in the United States. That really is. If you really start adding that up, that's most of the economy in the United States. It's not actually about the actual production of goods and services that people actually need. And this is why, without, you know, you really don't want to look at a chart per se and say the dollar's doing this and the index is doing that and this is doing this on this way on this chart. That's not really, you're not seeing the whole overall picture. Everybody knows it too. Everybody knows what I'm saying here right now, but I don't think anybody's actually saying it. But this is the real reason we're going to have a financial collapse in the United States. And that is why, you know, anybody that's really somewhat, you know, realizes that this will happen at one point in time, they need to be actually on the ball and know how to do things on their own. Because the ones that are actually going to get cut the most are going to probably be the bureaucracy and even the Wall Streeters, you know, the traders and things like that. And you've seen this happen before, because basically they're superfluous fluff. But you know, everybody, like Jim Rogers even says, like, I don't like that guy too much, but he's got something right about nobody wants to be a farmer today because that's considered the lowest trade, basically. It's almost like it doesn't have the status. You know, somebody would rather be a Wall Street broker and walk around like there's some highfalutin big deal than be a farmer. And this is actually going to cause a major crisis in the future. That's what he says, and I agree with this. And actually, it's going to go along with everything else like this trade, where people who are, they're going to, you know, in other words, everybody has to have food. You know, pushing paper around and filling out forms and filling out little things on a computer is not going to grow your food. You know, these people, the only thing they know is go to a restaurant for lunch, right? That's all they know. Jim Rogers is right, though. Somebody's actually going to have to actually produce something, and you know what's going to actually happen? They're going to be the ones with the money, not the bureaucracy. It's actually going to go full tilt the other way. So, you know, I'd like to see that, to tell you the truth. You know, personally, I'd rather be doing auto body work and stuff like that, or mechanical work, even though it's very, very, very tough trade to do. And you know, I might get into more of that, some more of my videos. I've been popping some out once in a while on some of the how-to stuff, but I realize the financial collapse is not really in the numbers, it's not really in the charts, it's in the everyday overall what you see. It's obvious that most of the United States economy is a bureaucracy built upon government regulation one way or the other. And most of these people, whether they're in the government or even corporations or individual businesses, are both basically little pogues, male and female, that aren't really contributing something that's essential to the everyday lives of people. They're contributing something that's essential to stupid rules. Petty rules, and it's gonna that is gonna collapse. That's gonna collapse. So I'm not being a doom and gloomer, but you got to look at it from a very simple, common sense perspective. And you know, it's good. The future is actually going to belong to the actual skilled labor and the farmers and things like that. These other clowns, they're never going to do it. They're never going to do it. Not in a million years. Not in a million years. These, you know, these little pogues that are around in offices, they're never going to do that kind of work in a million years. Because they're lazy. They want, you know, they don't want to get dirty. They don't want to be in the sun. They don't want to get in the dirt. They don't want to be in the cold. They don't want to be in the rain. They don't want to deal with dirt. They don't want to deal. Yeah, they just don't want to deal with it. They don't want to deal with it. That's how these people are. So the way they got it hooked up now is they go over to China and they go buy something from China because it's cheap, because somebody else over there is doing it. But once that changes due to the revaluation of the dollar, all these pogues are going to be up shit's creek without a paddle, to put it, you know, the old saying out there, and that's just what's going to happen. So anyway, that is why there's going to be a financial collapse. We are burdened with overhead like crazy. Anyway, over now.